Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a stubborn Oklahoma rancher receives a bogus HOA letter claiming his land, he laughs it off until the suburban invaders cut his fence, trespass, and fall straight into his waste pit. What follows is a wild, hilarious, and badass showdown between freedom and fake authority. I never gave much thought to HOA nonsense until it started showing up in my mailbox, dressed up in official language and cheap intimidation. The first envelope was slick, with gold lettering and a little emblem of a tree with roots shaped like dollar signs. Golden Butte Heights Homeowners Association, your participation matters. That was the opening shot. Inside, an invitation to a community planning session, along with a warm welcome to their extended family of land-conscious neighbors. I nearly choked on my coffee. My land, 120 acres of Oklahoma prairie, pasture, and pine, had been in my family for 3 generations. It predated Golden Butte by 80 years. Their community ended at the edge of their cookie-cutter cul-de-sac. My fence wasn't just decorative, it was a damn boundary. I tossed the letter into the file cabinet and went back to work, figuring some overzealous volunteer just got too friendly with the county plat map. A few weeks later came the second letter, this time certified. Outstanding dues notification, immediate attention required. It claimed I owed $540 in back dues for shared perimeter maintenance. I stared at it for a good 5 minutes, jaw clenched. My perimeter was maintained by me, my dogs, and a John Deere brush cutter. I took the letter, scanned it, printed a copy, and dropped it into a folder marked HOA Idiocy. Then I ordered another set of infrared perimeter cameras and 2 more private property no trespassing signs just in case they were illiterate as well as entitled. The third letter came mid-June. Zoning infraction warning, unauthorized fencing structure. That one had me laughing out loud. According to the HOA, my 8-foot fence with barbed wire violated their aesthetic guidelines. Never mind that it was a working ranch fence, legal by county code and on private land. The letter went on about needing to submit architectural plans for approval and obtain a fence permit through their architectural committee. They even attached a grainy aerial photo of my pasture, presumably taken from a drone, with the fence circled in red ink like I was some sort of criminal mastermind building defenses against their suburban empire. That one earned them a report to the sheriff for suspected aerial surveillance. I wasn't messing around. Then came the fourth letter. It arrived 2 days before I had to drive upstate to pick up a shipment of feed. Bold font, legalese. Final warning, before enforcement measures. It threatened court proceedings, property liens, and, most ridiculously, a mandatory in-person property assessment to be conducted by a certified HOA compliance officer. According to them, failure to respond constituted tacit agreement to visual inspection under provisional HOA bylaws. I read that line twice. Then a third time. They were making up their own laws now. The HOA was LARPing as a government body. All that was missing was a fake badge and a cardboard checkpoint. I didn't respond. Instead, I backed up my entire digital file of HOA correspondence, mapped out my property boundaries on satellite overlays, and printed off copies of my deed, zoning exemptions, and historical plat map, the kind with surveyor signatures and county seals. I left them in a clearly labeled folder on my kitchen counter, just in case. Before leaving for the feed supplier, I checked my perimeter cameras, turned on the infrared sensors, and let out the dogs. 3 Belgian Malinois, lean and fast, trained to patrol and alert, not maul. When I drive off the property, they know the routine. They become the eyes and ears of the land. As I pulled out onto the county road, I glanced once in the rearview mirror. The house sat quiet under the Oklahoma sun, white porch shimmering in the heat, the tall pines casting long shadows. I didn't know it yet, but that would be the last peaceful view of my ranch before it became a headline. The call came on a Saturday morning. Not to me, of course. No one had my number except for suppliers, the county vet, and a few old buddies from my DNR days. The call went to the HOA group chat, the same one I wasn't supposed to know existed. One of the residents, probably some retiree who thought their fence line gave them jurisdiction, had spotted me leaving the ranch with my trailer in tow. That was the green light. According to the footage I'd later review, they wasted no time. At precisely 10:32 a.m., a dark green SUV pulled up alongside the east access road just outside my property. 4 people emerged. I recognized Karen Ratterman instantly, the queen of Golden Butte Heights, clipboard in hand, hair sprayed into what looked like a helmet built for legal combat. With her was Linda Higgs, her deputy of compliance operations, a retired dental hygienist with a righteous streak. Behind them trailed a younger couple I didn't recognize, likely HOA volunteers too new or too naive to know what they were about to step into. The footage from my Eastern trail cam was crystal clear. Karen stepped right up to my 8-foot perimeter fence, the one with the warning signs every 30 feet, and pulled out a bolt cutter like she was storming Normandy. She clipped the padlock on the side gate, tucked the broken piece into her handbag, and pushed the gate open with all the grace of a lady entering a wine tasting. Linda followed behind her, muttering something while scanning the field with a handheld tablet, presumably full of pretend citations. The younger couple hesitated, but were quickly ushered through the opening with a brisk wave. Once inside, they shut the gate behind them, not to hide their tracks, but probably because Karen was already monologuing about site containment and liability zones. My security system, set to passive observe when I'm home, had already flipped into active perimeter monitoring. The breach triggered the system-wide alert. While the HOA field trip wandered deeper onto the ranch, 3 Belgian Malinois stirred from their climate-controlled kennels and trotted into the field like they were clocking in for a shift. They didn't bark. They didn't charge. Just a low growl and wide circle as they watched the intruders from a distance. A silent warning, like thunder on the horizon. The HOA inspection squad kept moving. Karen took photos of a fence post. Linda took a soil sample. Of what, I can only imagine. One of the younger ones wandered off and stepped in a pile of horse manure, which, judging by his shriek, he thought was radioactive. My cameras caught every moment, every stumble, every phone recording, every frown at a fence line that dared to exist without committee approval. Then things took a turn. At 11:06, the dogs closed in, not to attack, just to herd. Karen screamed first, dropping her clipboard and bolting in a zigzag through the open pasture, losing one of her heels in the process. Linda shrieked and followed, tablet flailing in one hand. The 2 younger ones made a break for it in the opposite direction. Bad idea. They hit the irrigation trench and went down hard, sliding into a shallow patch of standing water. Karen and Linda kept running, but they were panicking, eyes darting, lungs heaving. You could almost hear the suburban delusions unraveling with every step. Then came the moment that would end up burned into my security footage archive forever. At the edge of the lower field, there's a reinforced concrete recess, a storm overflow and waste management catch that ties into a larger subterranean filtration system. The sign nearby clearly says, "Gray water containment, do not enter." But reading comprehension isn't the HOA's strong suit. Karen, eyes wild, tore open the rusting hatch door and jumped in like she was diving into a foxhole. Linda followed without a second thought. There was a splash, then silence. The 2 younger ones had regrouped and were now cautiously backing away toward the eastern gate, soaked and traumatized. The dog stopped at the property perimeter, watching without advancing. Good training. No bites, no scratches, just presence. Enough to keep the HOA from wandering further into trouble. By the time the system logged the final movement, the only things left moving on that side of the ranch were the cows in the north pasture and a single overturned clipboard flapping in the breeze. I wouldn't find out what happened until I got back the next evening. But as the cameras ticked over into the afternoon hours, 3 humans sat waist-deep in semi-liquid compost runoff, baking slowly under the Oklahoma sun in a cement box with no cell reception, no clean water, and, as one would later describe it to, the EMT, the smell of legal failure. By the time I got back to the ranch Sunday evening, the dogs were calm, the sun was low, and the air smelled like hay, and the kind of peace you only get on land that minds its own business. I backed the trailer into its slot behind the barn, unloaded the feed, and went to check the system logs. The motion sensors had recorded a spike in movement on the east perimeter the day before, multiple alerts around late morning. The thumbnail from one camera showed what looked a hell of a lot like Karen Ratterman's face mid-grimace, climbing over my gate. I stared at the image for a second, then muttered, "You've got to be kidding me." Pulling up the footage, I watched the whole parade, the bolt cutters, the gate breach, the dramatic trespass in broad daylight, complete with HOA branded polo shirts and self-importance thick enough to pave a driveway. I watched Karen march past the no trespassing signs without a glance, watched Linda fumble her way into a mud puddle, watched the dogs appear, not attacking, just shadowing, and then the group dissolve into pure panic. What I didn't expect to see was the part near the end, Karen and Linda disappearing into the old concrete overflow chamber like it was a survival bunker. My stomach dropped. That catch basin wasn't for people. It was where gray water, runoff, and waste from the horse stalls settled before draining into the subterranean sand filter. It had warning signs. A locked lid, now broken. It was also about 5 feet deep in semi-liquid sludge, especially after the last storm. I switched over to the internal sensor logs. The hatch had opened at 11:04 a.m. the previous day. It had not closed since. Grabbing a flashlight, gloves, and a thermos of water, I headed straight for the lower field, the dogs trotting beside me like they already knew. The smell hit me before I reached the hatch, thick, warm, ripe. A sickly blend of ammonia, compost, and despair. I knelt down and aimed the flashlight into the pit. There they were, Karen, Linda, and a third figure I recognized as one of the younger HOA lackeys, all huddled in the concrete cavity. Karen's blonde hair was slicked to her scalp, her eyes bloodshot. Linda looked half-conscious, her shirt stained up to her chest. The younger guy was shivering and muttering something about chemical exposure. They didn't respond at first. When Karen did look up, her voice was barely a croak. "You took your time." I stared down at them. "You broke into my property, ignored posted warnings, and jumped into a sealed wastewater pit. You're lucky I didn't find bones down there." Karen tried to stand and slipped, landing with a splash that triggered a collective moan from the group. I saw one of their phones, soaked and dead, floating next to her like a little piece of tech-shaped irony. I set the flashlight down and lowered a rope ladder I kept tied nearby for septic maintenance, then passed down the thermos of clean water. None of them looked like they had the strength to climb out, so I called it in. First to the sheriff's office, then to county EMS. The deputies arrived first. 2 of them. One was a younger guy I didn't know. The other was Deputy Mullins, old-timer straight shooter. He gave me a long look when I showed him the camera footage. "You serious?" "Serious as a heart attack in a sauna full of lawsuits." He chuckled under his breath, then leaned over the hatch. "Mrs. Ratterman, this is Deputy Mullins. You're going to be fine, but I need to inform you that you're currently under investigation for criminal trespass and vandalism." "You can't be serious," she rasped. "We were inspecting." "You broke a lock, ignored posted warnings, and entered an agricultural containment structure uninvited. This isn't a cul-de-sac, ma'am. This is a working farm with legal protections." EMS showed up 15 minutes later, hazmat suits and all. They got the 3 of them out with stretchers, dehydration kits, and the kind of quiet judgment only medical professionals can deliver with a single glance. Karen tried to speak as they loaded her into the ambulance. "This isn't over, mister." "Harper," I nodded. "You're right. It's just getting started." When the last siren faded down the road, I walked back to the basin, climbed down the ladder with a bucket of lime, and got to work. The smell would take a week to fade. The legal firestorm they'd just ignited much longer. By Monday morning, my property had turned into a minor spectacle. I woke up to the sound of gravel crunching under unfamiliar tires. Sure enough, a white SUV with county plates was parked at the edge of my drive. 2 men and a woman in khakis and windbreakers were snapping photos of my front gate and scribbling on clipboards. Not law enforcement, code enforcement. I made my coffee, threw on boots, and walked out to meet them, dogs at heel. "Can I help you folks?" I asked. The woman stepped forward. "Mr. Harper, we're here to conduct a preliminary site inspection following a civil complaint filed with the county over the weekend." I cocked an eyebrow. "Let me guess. Karen Ratterman." The woman hesitated, then nodded. "The complaint includes allegations of unsafe containment structures, unsecured dangerous animals, and environmental code violations." "Right," I said slowly. "The containment structure they broke into and the dogs that didn't touch them." She cleared her throat. "We still have to document everything. Standard procedure." "Be my guest," I said, and led them on a tour of the ranch with a level of patience I reserved for bureaucratic theater. They inspected the gray water pit, which was now clearly marked, locked, and covered with 3 new signs. They looked over the kennels, which were cleaner than most restaurants I've eaten in. They measured fence height, verified security systems, and checked posted signage. By the time they finished, they looked mildly embarrassed. The lead inspector shook my hand. "Everything appears to be in full compliance. Expect an official letter of clearance within 10 business days. Appreciate it, I said, handing him a flash drive. Here's the footage of the trespass for your records. High definition. By the time they left, I already knew what was coming next. Karen hadn't slunk away to nurse her wounds. She'd gone straight to the courthouse. And sure enough, by Thursday afternoon, I received a thick envelope from a law firm in Tulsa, a civil lawsuit filed on behalf of Karen Ratterman, Linda Higgs, and unidentified HOA representatives, alleging that I had knowingly maintained a hazardous and psychologically damaging environment, endangered civilians with aggressive animals, and caused trauma due to unlawful detention in a contaminated area. I read it 3 times. Then I laughed so hard I had to sit down on the porch steps. They wanted damages, emotional, physical, reputational. Karen's lawyers had stapled in exaggerated victim statements about fear, dehydration, and feeling hunted by large predator dogs. One paragraph claimed Linda still couldn't sleep without smelling ammonia. Another accused me of intentionally crafting a hostile atmosphere for HOA outreach. The pièce de résistance was the section requesting a temporary restraining order against me and my agents, including but not limited to trained canines. I called my lawyer, Daniel Ruiz, a former wildlife prosecutor with the state AG's office who'd once sued a rancher for poisoning river water with pig waste. He was the type of guy who wore cowboy boots with his suit and called motions horse manure with a straight face. He read the suit and snorted, "This is adorable. Let's bury them." Over the next week, we assembled our counterpunch. I handed over high-res video of the gate breach and bolt cutter action, audio footage of Karen stating we'll conduct our own inspection, screenshots of all 4 letters from the HOA, my deed, surveyor-certified boundary maps, and zoning exemption documents dating back 20 years. Daniel filed a motion to dismiss the suit outright and added a preliminary countersuit for criminal trespass, vandalism, and attempted fraud via false claims of jurisdiction. Court was set for a preliminary hearing the following Tuesday. The courtroom wasn't full, but it buzzed. Local reporters were there, HOA members too, some out of loyalty, others just curious to see how far Karen had taken her reign. Karen herself entered like a movie villain, all white blouse and stiff posture, flanked by her attorneys. She didn't look at me. Probably couldn't. Not after spending 5 hours in ranch stew. The judge, a seasoned man with silver hair and a temper for theatrics, listened as Karen's lawyer opened with the phrase, "Our clients entered the property under the belief that it was part of their governance boundary." The judge held up a hand. "Let me stop you right there. Is the property in the HOA?" "No, Your Honor, but we argue." "Then you have no standing, no authority, no excuse, and unless you can show me a signed agreement or court order that says otherwise, you can sit down and save us all some time." The courtroom murmured. Karen's face stiffened. Daniel stood and delivered our materials with a calm, predatory grace. He let the videos speak for themselves. He even zoomed in on the no trespassing signs, posted every 20 feet. By the end of the hour, the judge dismissed the HOA's lawsuit with prejudice. Then came the real fun. "I'm granting Mr. Harper's motion to proceed with a countersuit," the judge said, "and I'm forwarding this matter to the county prosecutor for review of potential criminal violations." Karen turned pale. One of her attorneys whispered something, and she swatted him away. "Next hearing will be set within 30 days, the judge said. "Court is adjourned." I walked out of that courthouse with nothing but a quiet nod to Daniel and a half smile aimed in Karen's direction. She didn't look back. Her lawyer did. His eyes said it all. They'd brought a knife to a land war. I figured after the hearing, Karen would take the loss like most people take a hard lesson, with some bitterness, maybe a little denial, and a lot of silence. But I should have known better. Karen wasn't most people. She was a walking grievance, a cocktail of entitlement and suburban justice fantasy with just enough administrative jargon to convince the gullible she had power. And power, it turned out, she wasn't ready to give up. It started with whispers. First, my mailbox began filling up again. Not with official letters this time, but with anonymous flyers. Printed in black and white, no return address, each one screamed some variation of "Dangerous Rancher Loose Near Golden Butte," or "Children at Risk," due to unreported livestock runoff. One was a fake newspaper clipping, clearly photoshopped, showing a headline about unpermitted biohazard tanks and toxic dog attacks. I collected them like baseball cards, each one more absurd than the last. I kept them in a folder labeled Karen's Descent into Madness. Then came the Facebook group. One of my neighbors, a good guy named Russ who runs a feed store, sent me screenshots from a private HOA Facebook page where Karen was apparently still acting as president. In it, she described the court loss as procedural and claimed the judge was biased against community rights. She encouraged residents to report any suspicious activity on my property and referred to my dogs as semi-feral military animals. One woman commented asking if she should call child services because she saw a goat outside without shade. Another offered to bring a drone to monitor runoff. Russ added, "She's whipping them up like it's a HOA crusade." I wasn't worried about drones or gossip. I was worried about what Karen might try next. People like her don't stop. They escalate. So I got proactive. First, I called in my buddy Logan, a retired geodetic engineer, to re-verify my property lines using drone-mounted LiDAR. We ran a full 3D topographical map overlay, GPS tagged, and notarized every square foot of it. Second, I installed thermal perimeter sensors tied into my phone's alert system. The dogs were great, but technology doesn't sleep. And third, I took Daniel's advice and filed an injunction preventing any HOA officer or representative from setting foot on my land, civil or otherwise, under penalty of trespass. That's when the dominoes started to fall. During the injunction filing, Daniel requested discovery access to HOA's documentation, including their bylaws, meeting minutes, financial records, and most importantly, any legal grounds they had ever claimed to include my property. We expected them to dodge, delay, deflect. Instead, they coughed it up fast. Too fast. Something stank. Inside the packet of documents, we found what Karen had referred to as the Provisional Expansion Amendment. It was a single-page typed document dated 2 years prior, with a forged-looking signature from a dead council member and no county filing. Stamp. No board approval, no vote record, and absolutely no registration in the county's HOA registry. Worse, or better depending on your perspective, the document had been used to push through increased dues from existing HOA residents. According to internal emails, Karen had told the board that external threats from unregulated properties required them to invest in perimeter control initiatives. She then funneled over $80,000 into a security improvement fund, a large chunk of which went to her husband's contracting business. The same business, incidentally, that had provided the bolt cutters used on my gate. Daniel and I sat there in his office going through every line. She invented a threat, he said. Used it to extract money, expand territory, and try to take over private land. She built a war on paper, I muttered, and funded it with HOA fear money. We presented the findings to the county prosecutor the following Monday. By Friday, the case had a number: investigation into fraudulent activity by a registered HOA, potential embezzlement, misuse of resident funds, forgery, and attempted land fraud. The sheriff's office executed a search warrant at the HOA office, which was, ironically, Karen's converted garage. The local news picked it up fast. Channel 7 ran a segment titled HOA President Under Fire for Fake Expansion and Fecal Scandal. The footage of Karen being escorted out of her own driveway in handcuffs, wearing an I Know My Rights t-shirt, went viral in under 6 hours. Some residents came forward with horror stories of their own. Fines for lawn decor, threats over mailbox paint colors. One elderly couple said Karen threatened to report them for emotional neglect of their cat because it wasn't microchipped. It became clear Karen had been operating more like a petty dictator than a community leader. As for the board, most of them resigned within 72 hours. The few who remained claimed ignorance. The HOA bank account was frozen pending audit, and Karen's husband was named in the investigation for conflict of interest and falsifying invoices. I heard his construction license was revoked by the end of the month. Meanwhile, my ranch stayed quiet, peaceful, untouched. The dogs slept a little easier, and so did I, but I had one more move left. I thought things would slow down after the raid on Karen's HOA lair. I figured the worst had passed. But no. This was the part where the roaches started fleeing the light, and the deeper the county investigators dug, the more of them they found. The first bombshell dropped 2 days after the news aired. I got a call from Daniel around 8 in the morning. "Dan," he said, voice low like he was trying not to shout, "you're not going to believe this. The contractor Karen brought with her that night, The guy in the camo vest? Turns out he wasn't just some volunteer handyman I already didn't like where this was going. Go on. He was convicted in Texas 2 years ago for criminal trespass and assault during a boundary dispute. Did 6 months. Had a suspended sentence. No HOA background, no contractor's license in Oklahoma. She brought in a thug and called him an inspector. My grip tightened on the coffee mug, and he's listed on HOA payroll. Bingo. Under security consultant. Karen paid him nearly $12,000 over 5 months for what she called external deterrent assessment. I leaned back and stared at the ceiling fan. So she hired a felon to intimidate me off my own land, more or less. Later that day, a sheriff's deputy came out to take an official statement. We went over everything again. The fake documents, the breach, the dogs, the pit, and now this guy's name, Kyle Dorsey. Apparently, Dorsey had been part of a loosely connected group of HOA enforcers that bounced around small towns, offering consulting to HOA boards eager to flex control. Karen had found him through an online forum. Meanwhile, more homeowners from Golden Butte Heights came forward. One man, middle-aged, soft-spoken, the kind of guy you'd trust to watch your house while you were gone, showed up on my porch unannounced with a thick manila envelope. His name was George Mathis, and he'd served briefly as HOA treasurer before stepping down. She told us the expansion was legit, he said, eyes tired. She waved around this map she claimed was stamped by the county. She never let us see the originals. And when I started asking questions about the budget, she accused me of siding with the redneck squatter next door. I raised an eyebrow. That'd be me, I guess. George smiled faintly and handed me the envelope. Inside were old meeting notes he'd photocopied before quitting, along with screenshots of emails Karen sent to select board members, threatening them, guilt-tripping them, or bribing them with favors in exchange for votes. One even hinted at forging a community petition to force annexation of hostile lands. That last phrase sat in my head like a tick. I passed it all to Daniel. His eyes lit up like a kid on Christmas. This is conspiracy, Dan. That's what this is. Not in the tinfoil sense. I mean legally. Collusion to fabricate governance authority, I nodded. And now it's all on paper. Things snowballed from there. County auditors confirmed that over $290,000 had been misused across 3 years of Karen's presidency. Some went to security infrastructure, including 2 drones, a thermal scanner, and a series of surveillance poles that had never been installed. Others went to community improvement, like a failed HOA podcast and a landscape artist Karen hired to paint watercolors of people's homes for historical record. That artist? Her niece. But the real kicker came from a clerk in the municipal planning office. Apparently, Karen had submitted a rezoning request months prior, one that would reclassify my land as border-adjacent shared-use property, which could have eventually subjected it to annexation if no objections were raised within a certain window. The kicker, she forged my signature. Daniel brought it to the attention of the DA. Within 48 hours, a second arrest warrant was issued, this one for forgery of a public document, a felony. The charges stacked like cordwood: trespass, fraud, conspiracy, misappropriation of funds, intimidation, and now forgery. Karen was arrested again, this time without fanfare. No news crews, no dramatics, just a knock on the door and a pair of cuffs. She was out on bail the same day, but the damage was done. Her name was Scorched Earth. HOA members held an emergency meeting, and for once they didn't invite her. The remaining officers voted unanimously to suspend all operations and submit to full financial audit. By the end of the week, a petition had circulated through Golden Butte Heights calling for dissolution of the HOA itself. It got over 80% of signatures in 2 days. As for me, I kept my head down. I spent my mornings tending to the land, brushing down the horses, running the dogs. But every now and then folks would stop by, some out of curiosity, others to apologize. Sorry we ever believed her, one woman said, almost in tears. She made it seem like you were some kind of threat. I just nodded and offered coffee. My security system was now state-of-the-art. 8 cameras with thermal imaging, 3 motion-triggered floodlights, and an AI-powered license plate scanner on the main road. The fence line was repainted and reinforced. And, for good measure, I added a new sign by the pit, the one Karen fell into. Welcome HOA, VIP pool access. It made me smile every time I walked past it. You'd think after 2 arrests, a county investigation, and a viral news segment featuring Karen's mugshot next to the words HOA fraud queen, the story would start winding down. But when someone builds their empire on fear and fake rules, they don't go down with grace. They go down swinging. Karen still had a few tricks left, and she wasn't going to vanish quietly into the Oklahoma dust. The final chapter of her little campaign kicked off one cloudy Thursday morning with a sound I hadn't heard in a while. A knock on my gate. Not a truck pulling up. Not a package drop-off. A literal knock. That gate's a solid 8-foot steel job with barbed wire, so hearing it get knocked on meant someone was either brave or stupid. I checked the cameras. It was a man in a suit. Gray, well-pressed, clipboard in hand. Not HOA. Not police. Not county. I opened the speaker. "Can I help you?" He looked up and smiled like a man who'd rehearsed this 100 times. "Good morning, mister." "Harper, I'm here on behalf of the State Department of Environmental Quality. We received a complaint regarding an unregistered wastewater retention structure on your property. I'm here to conduct an inspection." I stared at the monitor. For a solid 10 seconds, I said nothing. Then I replied, flat as a fence post, "You mean the pit?" "I'm sorry," I sighed. "The pit where 3 trespassers hid after jumping my fence and running from my dogs." He blinked. I'm just here to do an inspection, sir." "Is this complaint signed? Because I have video of what the structure is. It's not active. It's a capped gray water overflow tank from 20 years ago. Completely legal. Covered, marked, and fenced," he stammered. "I'll make a note of that, but I'm still required to inspect it." So I let him in, escorted cameras on, with my lawyer Daniel on speaker the whole time. The guy poked at the concrete, took 2 water samples from runoff nowhere near the pit, and left with the same sheepish look he arrived with. We traced the complaint. It came from an anonymous tip, but the language used, biological hazard risk due to unregistered waste structure, was lifted directly from the fake flyers Karen had circulated months ago. Word for word. Karen had tried one last Hail Mary through the state bureaucracy. Didn't work. DEQ closed the file within 72 hours, but the visit gave Daniel an idea. If she's still submitting state-level complaints under false premises, that's misuse of public resources and malicious reporting. Let's add that to the stack. At this point, the DA's office had enough to bring multiple felony counts to grand jury. And it wasn't just Karen anymore. Her husband, the one who'd handled the books, had signed off on several forged invoices. He was charged with aiding and abetting fraud, plus falsifying HOA expense records. The rest of the board claimed ignorance, but 2 more stepped down as witnesses, handing over group chats and internal emails that showed Karen coordinating it all like a military op. The final community meeting of Golden Butte Heights was surreal. It was held in the cul-de-sac between lots 18 and 19, with a couple dozen plastic chairs, lukewarm coffee, and a printed agenda that began with "Motion to dissolve the HOA." It passed in under 15 minutes. They voted to dismantle the HOA, liquidate its assets, and enter into voluntary community management. Karen's name was officially stripped from all founding documents. Her house, the HOA Palace, went up for sale within a week. Unconfirmed rumors said she left the state entirely. Her husband, facing fines and a suspended sentence, filed for divorce and quietly moved back to Arizona. I got a letter from one of the former residents, handwritten, thanking me for standing your ground when the rest of us were too afraid. He included a sketch of the pit with little cartoon figures flailing inside, and a title, Karen's Last Stand. I framed it and put it up in the mudroom. And the dogs, they became local celebrities. One of the sheriff's deputies helped submit their footage to a K9 certification board, and all 3 were recognized as defensive farm guardians. I laminated the certificates and hung them in the barn. By now, my land was more secure than most government buildings. I upgraded the cameras again, added a second gate with biometric locks, and even installed an underground cable that would cut power to the outer fence line in case someone tried another midnight visit. Paranoid? Maybe. But history taught me that HOA presidents don't go down easy. For the first time in months, things were quiet. No knocks, no letters, no intruders. Just the sound of wind through the mesquite and the occasional bark from the south pasture. And yet, as peaceful as it was, I knew this story wasn't just mine anymore. It had become something bigger. A symbol of how far people will go when they forget where their authority ends and someone else's freedom begins. It's been 6 months since Karen disappeared from Oklahoma. Half a year of peace, real peace, the kind that settles deep into your bones, where the only thing pressing on your shoulders is the weight of a saddle and not the stress of lawyers, inspectors, or lunatics with forged maps. The land has healed faster than I expected. The ground where they trampled through the south pasture has been reseeded. The busted gate was replaced with reinforced steel and new lock protocols, biometric this time because why not? The so-called hazardous wastewater structure is now officially listed in the county archive as Historic Agricultural Runoff Catchment, non-operational. Bureaucratic poetry if you ask me, but the pit, the infamous pit, got a makeover. One warm April morning, I walked out there with a fresh cup of coffee, looked down at the concrete lid, and grinned. Then I hauled out a paintbrush and staked a wooden sign next to it. It reads, "Welcome HOA. VIP pool access." It's become a bit of a landmark. Neighbors from as far as 2 counties over have driven up just to see it. They bring lawn chairs, take selfies, even ask for tours of the property like it's a living museum of HOA resistance. One guy, a retired firefighter, brought me a bottle of bourbon and told me, "You gave us all permission to say no." I started keeping a guest book. It's already halfway full. The best part, nobody's tried anything since. Not one letter, not one notice, not even a whisper of authority over my fence. The DA's office followed through. Karen's fraudulent activities led to a federal review of several other HOAs across the state. Turns out she was just the tip of the iceberg. Several regional presidents were using similar tactics, bluffing landowners into voluntary compliance through fake notices, doctored bylaws, and intimidation. Karen's case became precedent. Her trial wrapped up in May. She pled out, probably hoping to avoid jail. She got 18 months probation, 500 hours of community service, and a $98,000 fine. Her husband wasn't so lucky. Turns out forging financials is a bigger deal when you sign the bottom of every page. He got 18 months suspended, plus restitution and a state accounting ban. He also lost his CPA license. The HOA itself? Gone. Officially dissolved, removed from the Oklahoma State HOA registry. What's left is a voluntary neighborhood board that does little more than plan barbecues and pass around flyers about garage sales, as it should be. As for me, I started writing. Not just notes in a journal, but a full book. Title pending, but I'm leaning toward how to survive living next to an HOA without losing your mind or your land. It's part memoir, part guide, part middle finger. My dogs, Sasha, Duke, and Ranger, are all certified now, proudly wearing little tags that say Certified Livestock Guardian, Oklahoma AG Safety Division. They still sleep near the fence line, ears up, always listening, loyal beyond measure. A few months ago, I had a visit from a local reporter, young guy, bright eyes, real curiosity. He asked if I had any regrets. I told him the truth. The only thing I regret is not installing floodlights over that pit. Would have made the footage go viral faster, he laughed. So did I. This land has been in my family for generations. My great-grandfather bought it with savings from hauling freight during the Dust Bowl. My father taught me how to respect it. And now, after everything, after letters, threats, lies, and literal crap, I've reclaimed it in full. Not just legally, psychologically, spiritually, and I didn't do it by screaming or suing first. I did it by watching, documenting, waiting, then striking with the truth at the right time. That's how you win with people like Karen. You let them think they're in charge long enough to make their own rope. Then you hand them the end of it. And maybe, if you're lucky, you name a pit after them.